What's up, everyone, and welcome to episode 3 of Small Business Conversations, where we interview small business owners from a wide variety of industries all across the globe. And we discuss their business, their products and services, what makes them unique, any trials and tribulations they have, unique tips and tactics they use to grow their business, and so much more. Today, I have a special guest, someone I've known for a little while, but I'm happy to be able to get to know him a little bit better. Hailing all the way from Melbourne, Australia, has a background, I believe, in corporate finance and has now switched to health and fitness. And he now specializes in nutrition coaching, and he helps a lot of athletes optimize their performance with his nutrition protocols. He's also got a great quote that I found from him, which basically goes, "Diet is more than just calories and macros. It encompasses a lifestyle, all lifestyle factors, and if the individual feels restricted, socially excluded, or overwhelmed by their nutrition plan, then any short-term success they achieve will be short-lived." Couldn't be more better well said. Today I have with you guys Ben Borg from Married to My Macros. Welcome, Ben.
Thanks, Isaac. Cheers for having me.
Yeah, it's awesome, buddy. It's great for us to reconnect. Our audience doesn't know, but we know each other from the past. I'm a former gym owner, so we know each other from that community and that circle. And you trained or coached a lot of my former members in my gym, and that was awesome. You helped them get into tip-top shape. And I'd like to learn a little bit more about Married to My Macros, how it all started, and your journey to become a coach from the finance world and all of that. And also, you used to live in Vancouver, and now you're in Australia and vice versa. So you've been all over the map, literally and figuratively. So where did it all begin?
It feels like a lifetime ago now, corporate finance. But it started, I think, late teenage years, sort of like 16, 17 was sort of my first foray into the health and fitness space. And I think kind of like any young man, like your idea of health and fitness is essentially bodybuilding, right? Especially sort of 13, 14 years ago.
What you're saying is that is not the true measure of health and fitness?
I think the longer I'm in this business, the more I realize it's more of a, in my opinion anyway, it's a little bit more of a beauty pageant than definitely a measure of performance. And interestingly enough, I guess kind of a good segue into how we got to this point. But I basically feel like I'd spent more than a decade of my life basically trying to do everything incorrectly in terms of my own sort of path with health and fitness, particularly diet, body image, that sort of stuff. And I got to a point where all through university, I was working as a personal trainer, and I always just really enjoyed the gym. I liked training. I was playing footy, basketball, rowing, that sort of stuff. And they sort of encouraged we obviously get into the weight room as 15, 16-year-olds and start getting a bit stronger. And it wasn't too long before I was starting to enjoy the actual weights and that sort of training more than the actual sport I was playing. But yeah, I guess as when you're 19, 20, working as a personal trainer, and kind of studying accounting at the same time, it was sort of like, I'd had this second life in the health and fitness industry, which was a real passion, but it was always on the back burner for this corporate, like a real job kind of scenario. And I think I spent basically the better part of a decade sort of using bodybuilding.com, simplyshredded.com, testosteronation.com, like as these sort of, I guess like almost learning institutions, like taking things that I was reading and applying them directly to either my own training and nutrition, or I always had some PT clients on the side that were always kind of happy to play the role of guinea pigs and try different things. And ultimately, while I was still working as an accountant, was still primarily that person in my friendship group that my friends sort of sought out for advice in terms of training, programming, on nutrition protocols and that sort of stuff. I got to 26. I'd been working full-time corporate finance for 3 years and was at a point where I was like, I'm not sure what I'm doing. I'm kind of going down the path of wanting to become a CA, but still was like the person at the office that had the protein shaker on the desk and was getting up early to train. And I was kind of at a point where I was like training at 7 a.m. before work and really felt like by 8:30, like the best part of my day was done. And it was kind of like all downhill from there. So I ended up taking a friend of mine, my housemate at the time. He graduated, and he said, "Look, I start my internship at one of the big four in a month's time, and I kind of want to go overseas and have a bit of a break before then." And I was ready for a bit of a break, so we ended up doing just a 10-day, not even stint in Bali, where I actually met Katrina. And she was on a bit of a similar journey where she was working cardiac surgery, ICU, and had started CrossFitting and Olympic lifting by that time, and was sort of looking after her own nutrition and had done quite well through that. And similar to me, like she was that sort of go-to in her circle of friends where people were asking for help, advice, that sort of stuff. And we just had this connection, and essentially the thing that we bonded over the most was twofold. One, I coming from that sort of bodybuilding side of things, was getting quite disheartened with how much essentially bullshit there was in the industry, how much like snake oil salesmanship, how much misinformation, how much of that industry had just become like preying on ignorance and insecurity, really, in order to turn a quick profit. And her sort of other side of the spectrum was, you know, a full-time ICU cardiac surgery nurse. She's seeing the effects of really poor health, poor lifestyle, from the other side of the bed when it's almost like too late, you know, and kind of being in a situation where if I'd met this person 5 or 6 years earlier, potentially might have had the ability to impact and kind of change this course for them. So we kind of met in this common ground of being like, it'd be cool, like if we, you know, you imagine if we started a business, blah, 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 blah. And then ultimately it was for me just a pipe dream. I think, funnily enough, even though I left Bali sort of 5 days after meeting Kat, we stayed in touch. And this kind of idea of potentially starting a business as we continued to talk sort of grew legs. And within 12 months of meeting Kat in Bali, I'd quit my finance job. We'd started Married to My Macros, and I'd moved to Vancouver full time. So yeah, it moved pretty quickly once we sort of decided to do it. And basically, like I said, the reason for starting was we just wanted to properly help primarily our friends and family, and give them some actual usable information and help with their nutrition and with their training, and with trying to help create a healthy lifestyle. And sort of one thing led to another, and one friend had another friend who might be interested, and then that friend had some friends, and yeah, before we knew it, we were both full time, and now it's been 5 years, and we've gone from just Kat and I writing essentially meal plans on a coffee table in a basement suite in Vancouver to being a team of 7, 2 coaching hubs, one in Vancouver, one in Melbourne, and clients globally that we support and assist remotely. So yeah, it's been quite a journey.
No, that's sounds awesome, man. That is quite the journey. So you guys are about 5 years now under your belt. And now are
Yeah.
you primarily remote or do some in-person stuff now? I guess with COVID it's hard, but what's your business model exactly?
We were pretty lucky. Obviously, when you start a new business, the aim of the game is to keep overhead costs super low. Um, and so I guess originally when we started, I was still in Melbourne and Kat was in Vancouver. So we were in different time zones. We were primarily communicating ourselves online. And so it kind of naturally just fell into place that way, that this would sort of be the way to go, particularly given the hours that we were able to put into it. Once I moved to Van, we flirted a lot with the idea of, oh, we need a brick and mortar, we need to be in shop front, we need some face time. We went through a little stint where we actually rented that front office at Dynasty down there in Hornby Street. And I think essentially after 2 or 3 months of paying rent and noticing that even our local Vancouver clients were preferring to book online because it was just easier, it was sort of a situation where we were paying for rent and sitting there on our laptops consulting anyway.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
we kind of inadvertently, I think, ended up online. I think the advantage of having me being from Australia was always that we needed to create something that we could come back and forth from Vancouver with as little disruption to our client and our service delivery as possible. It's funny now when you look back and it's like, that was a really good strategic decision and that makes a lot of sense. But at the time, like, honestly, we were just winging it, you know? I did have that corporate finance experience. So I did have, you know, an accounting background. I understood the need to understand the numbers and cash flow and tax provisions and stuff like this. So that definitely helped, as much as I might not look back overly fondly of my time in corporate finance. I definitely picked up a lot of super useful skills there as a business owner. But I think a lot of the time it really is, you're presented with a scenario, a situation, you make a decision that you think is the best at the time. And then whether it's right or wrong, once you make a decision, you have to commit and kind of move forward in that direction. If it turns out in a little bit of time that it's the wrong decision, then you correct and go again. But I think very quickly, especially in your first year, you learn quite fast that indecision is more costly than wrong decision, right? So we did make a lot of snap calls. I guess the fact that we're here 5 years later probably tells me that, hey, most of them were right, and maybe not too many of them were too wrong. But yeah, it has been a little bit of like, yeah, kind of, I hate the word luck, but yeah, I guess there is quite a bit of something kind of pushing us in there. Ultimately, I like to think that when your primary concern for operating a business is actually to help people and to kind of do right by the community, that ultimately that is rewarded, right? So I think that's definitely been the case.
No, it's amazing. We share a similar story. I mean, when I first started, I was had a business major as well, and I thought that would be the route I'd want to take because that would lead to a quote unquote real job.
Yeah.
But I always had a passion for sports, health and fitness, working out, and I kind of just fell in love with the passion of working out, like you, more so than actually playing the sport. I switched majors into kinesiology, and then got my degree in that and got my personal training certification and started working with people and really enjoyed that whole process. So we have a similar background there. And your point you made about the overhead, yes, overhead is definitely a killer in any brick and mortar business. I mean, even if it is profitable, it's always on the back of your mind. It's like, okay, we got to do X this month just to break even. We got to do this. So you're always thinking about it. And I just think in this day and age now with the internet and with COVID and everything else, you can move more of your services online. You're going to have a more viable business in the long run. So you guys definitely made the right decision there. And you guys are looking good. You're growing, and that's awesome to hear that. So I'm really proud of you guys.
Thanks, man. And I think, given what you're doing with Mum and Pop, like if I can just sort of provide testimony, I mean, you were the first business owner to actually pay for us to do a seminar, right? So in terms of like the help and support that you've been giving small businesses, not just in, more recently, but since the beginning, man, I can't pay homage enough. So yeah, I think that definitely, it's interesting, right? Going from the corporate world where, you sort of talk about your own life fulfillment and how much you feel like you're actually getting out of what you do every day. And it's like, great, I'm helping the facilitation of large multinational corporates move jobs offshore in order to like increase profits. It's like, what a contribution I'm making, And so I think that as a small business owner, it's kind of like having kids, right? Like you kind of watch this business grow and evolve, and you can talk to other small business owners, but until you have your own small business, you don't really understand. It's hard to relate. Like it is a slog. We're 5 years in, and I feel like now we're starting to get to a point where we're beginning to branch out a little bit larger than maybe people that know us directly or have a direct referral from clients that we have worked with. And it's not 5 years of just like putting your feet up and kind of like waiting for time to tick. Like it's a real grind like that. It's like 90% of businesses don't make it like past the first 2 years. And I was very fortunate, and MTMM was very fortunate to be in a position where because of how specialized like Kat's nursing was, we were able to survive off one income really primarily for the first 12 to 18 months. So we could have myself working more than full-time hours on the business, setting things up, kind of pushing the brand, and still be able to make ends meet with Kat, working for MTMM primarily as our first coach and also as an ICU nurse. So it's not easy, small business route, but it's certainly like super rewarding. And I honestly, you get to a point where, not that you ever want your business to fail, but it's almost like I could never see myself doing anything different now. I couldn't imagine having to go back and someone telling me I have to be at this seat, at this desk, at this time, and I have to stay there until this time, and it's not to say that it's without stress. It's probably more stressful than anything else I've ever done. But I think the upside and the reward, especially when you work in a people-related service like we do, the people you meet, the journey you get to play a role in being a part of, and ultimately, striving to help them achieve their goals is incredible. It's an incredible reward. So
You do it just to see the smile on the people's faces that you're serving, right? And it's such a, can't put a price tag on that. And I know for myself, helping people get into shape was always my passion. But then there was a part of me that came to a point also where I wanted to do more and have a higher calling. And I knew that, because I knew what it was like to be a business owner. I was basically a one-man show for a decade. And
mm,
I know how hard that can be. And I wanted to do something to help small business owners grow and thrive. And I wanted to just do something to kind of represent all the quote unquote mom and pops out there. So
yeah,
that was also played into my back of my mind when I was closing down my facility. It's like, okay, this is great, but how long do you see yourself going down this path, or is there another path potentially that you could be going down? So all of these things kind of played into my role. But at the end of the day, you're in it because you're passionate about helping others, despite the grind, despite the long hours, despite not sure if you're going to make enough money this month or whatever it is, right? You just keep charging
yeah,
forward because you're kind of cut from a different cloth. So
yeah,
I respect that a lot, and yeah, it's great to see that. Now I have a question about your guys's services. So do you
yeah.
guys predominantly work with competitive athletes, or do you work with average Joes as well?
Yeah, so I guess for us, the biggest business challenge that we've had is, working with a lot of the clients that, for example, that kind of came through Pure Pain. Um, we're already dealing with the top of the spear. Like if someone's training 4 or 5 days a week, even if they're not really paying a heap of attention to their diet specifically, they understand the importance. They understand like the impact that it does play. And so primarily like those that see value, are those that have made up traditionally the majority of our business. But for us, it's always been, well, the challenge lies in okay, these people here that are our predominantly our community and how much we love working with them. Essentially, these aren't the members of the community we're most concerned about, right? But it's that kind of irony where it's like, oh, the ones that are doing fine are the ones that understand how important it is. It's those ones over here that just have no idea, that perhaps don't see the value in what we do. And for us, that's always been the biggest challenge: is how do we bridge across the two? Um, and so that, COVID has actually been for us, and I hate to use the term blessing, but it's kind of forced that hand a little bit more, because we've been in a situation, even with the majority of our clients who are recreational high level athletes, primarily what we do is prepare them for competition, right? So specifically to the Vancouver community, there's a lot of Fraser Valley Throwdown preparation, CanWest Games, the Open, obviously we've got Rolf and the games and all the things that she aspires to do within that season. Canadian weightlifters, nationals, working on the weightlifting circuit too. There's always been something that's 3 or 4 or 5 or 10 weeks away that it's like, okay, let's dial you in now, get you prepared, and so we can have you really peak in terms of performance for this specific day. And COVID kind of just came along, and all of a sudden, like the competition, seasons were gone across the board. And so there was a lot of people that were kind of halfway to preparing for CanWest Games or OVT and stuff like that, that all of a sudden it was like, well, what now? And that actually gave us a really good opportunity to have these conversations with our clients where it's like, you've been telling me this whole time that you train because you enjoy the lifestyle and you like being healthy. Well, this is the test for that now. Now that there is no comp, now that there is no podium to stand on, now that there isn't these accolades that come with this lifestyle, how much do you believe everything that you've been talking about and working toward, right? So it was a really, really good, I guess, opportunity for us to have those conversations with clients to say, look, this is ultimately what we've been preparing you for. The sports and the podiums and the medals are great, but ultimately we've been trying to optimize just how well you look after yourself, and I hate to say, in case there's a pandemic, like we prepared you for it, but it was really a test of that getting through adversity, that developing like self-belief, that faith that like, however difficult things might be, that you possess the ability to see that through. That's ultimately what we encompass into our program. The actual nutritional science for most people is a very small part of what's holding them back from getting to where they want to be. So COVID gave us that ability not just to refine those conversations with our athletes, but to also pitch the importance of a healthy diet, a structured routine, lifestyle factors to the general public in general that were the most susceptible to potentially getting sick, not having those kind of skills or tool sets to deal with like abrupt change, adversity, self-belief in order to be able to overcome. So in many ways, it has helped us not shift the focus of our where our client work is, but ultimately increase the community of people that might now begin to see the value of what it is that we offer. So yeah, it's been tough, and it's been a lot of that, like making decisions on the fly, I guess, a little bit. But yeah, ultimately, and I guess again, being remote, we have had zero sort of service disruption over the last 12 months because everything we do is primarily remote. We do, you know, have a lot of affiliates that we work with and that sort of stuff. So obviously, you know, and you're a prime example of this too, wanting to do what we can to help those affiliates in terms of, look, we've got experience of running a community online and working to increase engagement. Let us help you. Here are some really good resources, different recipe ideas, whatever it might be, for you to post and begin to build your own online presence in order to keep your community engaged. Which was fun. The podcast, all that sort of stuff, all these different, I guess, like directions that we were able to go creatively in order to help do that have been super fun too. But ultimately it was like, okay, we see the landscape changing. Now, how do we pivot in order to continue to provide the same sort of service to our community that we've kind of always provided? So,
No,
yeah.
no, it's a great spin on things there, and it is quite ironic that yes, we've been preparing you to train and live a lifestyle, quote unquote lifestyle, and now is
Yep.
your opportunity to live that lifestyle. But you know, all joking aside, no, seriously, now how many of your athletes are now still as disciplined and committed, given that there's nothing to train for? A lot of them been like, you know what, cutting weight is such a headache, and now that I don't have to do it, you know what, I'm gonna eat whatever I want, or I'm gonna just loosen up this bootstraps a little bit. Like, what have you found has happened a lot with a lot of the athletes you work with?
I think primarily probably not as much as you think. I think there were maybe more the occasional acute phases of that happening initially. Maybe there was one or two people that had been training for CanWest for 6 months and really wanted this to be the year they made a good crack at it. And you get 4 weeks into it, or 4 months into a 6-month prep, you feel like you're almost there, and then all of a sudden it's gone. Those were hard conversations to have.
Yeah.
But a lot of the going forwards were like, cool, now our primary focus is keeping you in a position where the day that they announce the first competition that's back on, we're already ready, you know? And so I think that kind of perspective did help in a lot of instances. And hopefully, and not hopefully, but hopefully for our clients, there has been a lot of that from their competitors who don't have potentially the support that we offer our clients, right? So hopefully you're in a position where you can say, look, you've stayed with it while everyone else has been like slacking off, missing sessions, kind of like, you know, letting things go, that we've been still on point, so that ultimately when that first competition comes round, you can show that. You're going to get an opportunity to show just how much you've thrived in these conditions. Like, keep focused on that. So I think, and look, you get your top of the spears, you get your M. Rolf, you get your Cam Kushlers, who's you know, one of our super fit boys down here in Melbourne. Those guys will train in their garage 6 to 8 hours a day. You know what I mean? Or they'll go outside and they'll take a shovel and they'll dig a hole for 12 hours to get their physical activity in. Like, they're going to find a way. Yeah. When they're at that level. But even, you know, those kind of national level weightlifters and a bit lower, it's been actually quite inspiring, even as a coach. You kind of, when you are telling your clients this and they're demonstrating it, it's almost like, well, I better do it as well now, because like, I don't want to be a hypocrite for one, but for number two, they're proving that it can be done and there's benefits from it. So it's actually been quite beneficial for us as individuals as well.
No, that's awesome, man. That's good. I was quite curious about that, what people's mindset would be like, especially if you're an athlete and you have a goal, but now that carrot isn't necessarily dangling right now. Are you still driven? Are you still motivated? Or do you just hang it up and just wait for the dust to settle? So it's interesting to see that they've maintained that mindset. and they've learned that, like in the long run, this is how you need to treat your body and your mind if you want to be
Yep.
successful. So that's great.
I
So
think it's definitely, sorry, it's definitely been something since starting that we've learned more is just how important that sort of like psychological impact on lifestyle and ultimately weight loss or muscle gain can be, and if your mindset and your perspective aren't front of mind on things to address when you're trying to make big lifestyle changes, like it's ultimately going to be short lived. So it is definitely something that we specifically will work on with our clients and having those conversations. And I think that, ultimately it's paid off, right? So especially here in Melbourne, it's a little bit different to what our Vancouver coaches are sort of reporting and what they're seeing, but we are starting to have competitions come back on now, right? So we did the hard grind of having gyms closed for close to 8 months, and now there's starting to be a little bit of a carrot starting to come back and be dangled a little bit in front of them. And it's, if you can get through when there's no carrot, and you can get through when there's, all these different challenges, like now you're ready to kind of hit straps and get straight into it. So
yeah,
it's
no,
exciting.
that's kind of what I want to touch on next was just basically you guys came out of a super long lockdown, pretty intense relative to what we were doing here on the West Coast. What was that
Yeah.
like personally for your business? How was it just to be in such a intense lockdown for so long?
I think our personal circumstance were a little bit different. We had our first child in the midst of all that craziness and lockdown too. So I guess there was always that to look forward to for us. And then maybe not the worst time to have a newborn. Got a lot of time to spend just the three of us and getting to know each other and figure things out, especially, in that midst as soon as Matea was born. There was obviously some issues, wasn't allowed to go into any of the appointments and stuff preceding it. Once basically Matea was born and Kat was moved off the delivery suite, I wasn't allowed to go to the ward. So there was those sort of issues as well on a personal front. But professionally, like I said, I try to remain optimistic and not just like defiantly optimistic, but I try to understand that, okay, this is a challenge. There's a way through it. We just have to find what that way is. And like I said before, work that we do through affiliates presenting seminars. It was hard when you have established friendships and relationships with these gym owners who you can relate to in terms of the cause of what they're trying to do and the positive impact they're trying to have on their community, have that kind of meeting taken away from them, right, through no fault of their own. So those conversations were hard, but it was a case, like I said, of pivoting a little more into that resource development and things like that, and sort of asking those affiliates, how can we help you? How can we continue to keep your community engaged and motivated and working forward and ultimately have you come out of the other side, So I think it was touch and go right towards the end there as well for a lot. Like I think had we gone into that ninth month, that might have been the tipping point, unfortunately, for a lot of businesses. But for the most part, especially here in Melbourne, we haven't had any of our associate affiliates have to shut their doors. So I think like that's a pretty big win for them for sure. And hopefully we've been able to play a little bit of role in that and to be able to help them, So I think especially, with what we're trying to do as a business and the impact we're trying to have, it's not good to be losing affiliates for the community, and I don't mean just like CrossFit affiliates, but I mean like those kind of, boutique gyms that are run primarily by actual individuals, not by big companies, right? The 24/7 gyms, like whatever, like there's six of them in the one street. But I think that, it's been almost that camaraderie that's been developed here amongst a lot of us is awesome. And ultimately, if we all do well, we all do well. We continue to do well. So I think maybe that's the other thing COVID's done, is sort of given us the opportunity to say to some different affiliates, hey, like we're not your competition. Like we're here to help us to help you. How can we help? How can we be of service?
No, that's great. I mean, that's essentially what our brand Mom and Pop's all about, is bringing all the little businesses from all the industries together, creating that community of the little guy, because we're all fighting that same battle. We all know the struggles we have versus the bigger corporations and stuff like that, right? So absolutely, that rings true so much. Now, in terms of I guess, what have you found to be like the biggest struggle with helping people get the results they want? What's the biggest thing you find? What holds most people back? What is the difference between the people that really get it and those that are just lost?
I think, like I said, like definitely the psychology of individuals coming in and kind of what the expectation is of what we do, and sometimes that sort of quick fix that sometimes people are looking for tends to be the one thing that is sort of standing in their way. I think ultimately we need to change the conversations that we're having around body composition and diet, but ultimately like happiness and fulfillment and wholeheartedness and that sort of thing with our clients too. I think too many people associate their unhappiness with their scale weight, right? And feel like doing something short and sharp, and if I can just drop 10 pounds or 5 kilos, that all of my other problems are going to be solved. And ultimately, you know, when they get on the scale and they might have achieved their goal, but they haven't addressed any of these other issues, of course, you're going to see a reversion, right? So I think that we have not so much now. I think we're kind of at a point where most of the new work that's coming in has a pretty good idea that this is not a 6-week template 500 calories a day program. Like, we have no interest in, most of the time, a short-term solution, unless someone's preparing specifically for a comp that, you know, that needs to be done in that amount of time. Again, athletes and kind of your gen pop are very different, but reframing a lot of like what diet actually means, and trying to overcome a lot of the diet culture and misconceptions that people have surrounding food and surrounding the importance of an active lifestyle is definitely been the toughest part. And trying to get to people to actually commit to that real holistic lifestyle change. It's not about cutting carbs, right? Or it's not about like doing 4 hours of treadmill every day. It's about asking yourself, like, why are you doing this? Why is it important? What's your motivation? And trying to find and connect with people on what the real issue is. And for a lot of people, those are very confronting and uncomfortable conversations, you know. To admit that you're unhappy, right? Or to admit that maybe things haven't played out in your life specifically how you might have wanted them, but what can you do from that point? Once you get to that level, making like better choices for health and lifestyle is super easy, because you understand like the driving factors behind it. But yeah, it's the longer we're in it, it's almost like the lesser that you actually realize, the less it's about the food. If it was easy just following a meal plan, man, who wouldn't have a business?
Yeah, no, fair
Everyone
enough.
would be walking around super shredded, right?
No, it's true. It's so much of it is the emotions and the mind, and just everything that's going on in your life. Um, I'm gonna twist the knife a little bit. What's your pet peeve with the health and fitness industry? What kind of really irks and you wish would just go away?
Like the Kim Kardashian like diet plans, man. Like I hate how much our communities become, you know, your amount of followers or like that you have determines like the validity of what it is that you have to say. Like, I can't stand it. I wish things like Twitter and Instagram would, you know, the validation, the blue tick, whatever it is, I wish that would only apply to like them saying, hey, this person is actually qualified to have this opinion or this kind of espousal for this particular industry.
No doubt.
Because unfortunately, that's how that misinformation spreads. It's a celebrity that does something super drastic for 4 to 6 weeks to get ready for a part, that spouses that to 8 million people. And then we've got MTMM being like, we need to deal with your emotions and your mindset before we like deal with, and it's just like, you know, like, no, and it's very hard to get that kind of spotlight, right? You look at the size of the health and fitness industry, even the supplements industry, right? Largely unregulated. There's still people that think fat burners are the answer, right? It's that kind of like quick fix. And there's people that ultimately are happy to profiteer off it, right? And that's kind of the most disappointing. But yeah, it's kind of, we feel like every client that we get the opportunity to work with, and every client that we work over an extended term with that comes out of the program, we feel like it's a win for the little guys, right? Like it's kind of like one more tick in the box that helps us take that little step and that little step. And I'd love to hopefully have a platform of 10 million people that we can tell them, like, you know, stop associating your self-worth with the scales, like that sort of stuff, and have that message actually be broadcast out into the community.
Yeah. No,
That's the goal. That's the goal, 10 million.
I'm with you there, man. I've been preaching that for a long time, man. It's the delayed gratification, it's the hard work, the discipline,
Yeah.
all the unsexy stuff that no one wants to hear, but it's the truth. Unfortunately, it doesn't make for great headlines.
Yeah,
Um,
there's nothing sexy about like offering consistency over perfection, right? Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, no, I'm with you there for sure. I was just wondering if there were a few bones you had to pick with certain brands in the industry and things like that.
I think probably what I've learned is beware like within the health and fitness industry, beware those that are selling products over services, right? As like a general rule, I tend to feel like if you look at stuff like a skinny tea, it's such a transactional, like, cool, let's just sell 1 million units at $2. And if no one comes back for repeat business, it doesn't matter because we've already made, 2 million bucks. Whereas I think for those, there are so many providers out there like us that like genuinely do care. And it's like, yeah, obviously, we're trying to support our family and we've got kids and bills and stuff to pay as well. But it's not, get paid at all costs. It very much is like a big emotional investment on our behalf too. And you work with someone over 6 to 12 months, you can't help but really build that sense of rapport. And, as they become friends, like you want your friends to succeed, like you want that for them. And it's, yeah. So I think like beware the products that are trying to just do the one and done sort of deals and give a little bit more attention to those that are primarily trying to provide you with a service. Obviously, that's not a blanket rule. I'm sure there's plenty of like very average service providers out there too, where they are, it's almost a bit discouraging. Like, I don't know about your Facebook, but my Facebook is just full of people trying to become business coaches and ultimately just trying to automate absolutely everything they do. And I understand the preface and financial freedom and time freedom and stuff like that, but I think you can automate too much. And I think that ultimately, like, what will keep small business relevant is that ability to actually create individual relationships with their customers and with their client base. And that's my hope anyway, right? Like I would hate to automate that kind of personal touch out of everything that we do. And okay, there might be areas that we can do things efficiently in order to help us provide our service to more clients. But I would hate to just think that I don't know some of my clients, I don't know their first name or their partner's name. And they're just a number or an email that comes in once a month or whatever it is. Like that would take the fun out of it as a provider as well, more than anything.
No, I hear you saying there. I mean, that is the definition of a small business, is the personal relationships and the bonds we create. And that's our competitive advantage, right? It's as much as we want to automate, we want to streamline, we want to scale. It's that personal touch that really makes us unique, right? That's the irony of it all, really, right? So it's the gift and the curse.
Right. That's exactly right. It is that. How do you grow while trying to stay small?
Yeah.
Which I think for us is, we cap our coaches. I don't want my coaches having more than 35 to 40 clients at the most. Because once you're at that load, number one, your your coach starts to get tired, right? And if they're starting to get tired, they're going to start to miss things. But also, like, I don't want my coaches under that kind of like stress and duress all the time too. I don't want them burning out. I want them to be in this game for as long as possible because I need them. I need them to help me grow my vision. Right. So I want them to enjoy the work, but I also want them to make sure they have enough time to implement the strategies we're giving our clients in their own lives. And part of that is that rest and recovery and recouping and looking after themselves and staying active and doing their meal prep and all the rest. And that takes time in their week as well.
Oh, absolutely. Now, on average, how long does a client work with you for, or what's the minimum that they have to work with you for before you even take them on?
So we tend to work in 3, 6, or 12-month packages. It's an interesting conversation that we've been having in the last 2 to 3 months about, do we remove the kind of 3-month option altogether? Our average client engagement is usually that kind of 9 to 10 months. So most people that opt for the shorter, the 3-month, end up doing another package, if not a third package on top of that. And we're very, very concise with letting clients know, look, just because you choose a shorter package, it doesn't mean we fast track like your results,
Right.
And I think initially when you come into the health and fitness industry, it's 4-week cut and 6-week abs and all the rest of it. And so sometimes looking at a 6-month commitment or a 12-month commitment for a lot of people can be quite daunting. But if you're serious about making some pretty big fundamental like lifestyle shifts, you know, having that kind of 12 months is what it takes, ultimately 6 to 12 months to really like get a handle on all the different things that occur in your life over a 6-month span, right? I think that sometimes a lot of people don't actually realize how much they have going on until they try to implement something new, you know?
Yeah. That's very
You
true.
sit down for a client, how are things gone this week? And it's like, oh, we had this on Monday night, and then we had this happen on Tuesday night, and then Thursday night people came over, and it's like, oh, okay, well, so over the course of the week, you've only had, you know, maybe 2 meals at home. But when we did your initial, you sort of said that, oh, you cook most of your own food, the majority of time you do this and that. And it's like, oh, it's that kind of like light bulb moment where it is like, oh, I'm actually a lot more XYZ than I
Yeah.
realized.
No, I can imagine. And the tough part too, I imagine, is, you know, you want people to commit for the long haul because that's what it takes to be successful. But the consumer also needs to kind of test drive you a little bit to believe in your philosophy. So you got to
Correct.
give them a smaller taste before they buy the bigger package. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Kind of that.
yeah, for sure. Look,
Yeah.
and that's why I think we have such a large rate of extensions on the 3 months, because I think it's like, okay, they opt for it. They want to dip their toe in. They want to understand what it's about. And then they get to the 12-month or the 12-week mark and realize like, okay, I understand why you thought a 6-month or a 12-month option was a better way here. Let's go and kind of do a 6-month from this point,
Yeah.
right?
No, I can.
Um, yeah. I mean, look, from a business perspective, you try to steer them in that direction from the beginning in terms of like how you might set up your pricing. Obviously, the longer that someone comes on, the cheaper it does work out to be over the course of the pack, right? But yeah, there's a few people out there that are a little commitmophobes or whatever they're called. And yeah, it's interesting as a small business owner, sometimes you get into a pack, and if people do want to they stop or cancel, it's like they feel that they can just walk away from a contract too, which can be super frustrating when you're a small business. You know, like
Yeah.
I don't know anyone who turned around and says like, oh, they've decided they're not going to use their phone anymore, so they'll just like stop paying Talos or Bell or whatever, right? But they just assume they change their mind on a small business, and it's like, oh, well, we're stuck with no recourse then, I guess, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's you do see both sides of the coin for sure.
Oh, interesting. Now, you guys have been in the game 5 years now. What have you guys learned about in terms of marketing strategy? What areas have really worked well for you? Where do you think you can improve? You know, on that end of things, because I mean, at the end of the day, it's all about presence and attracting customers, right?
Yeah, I think as we've been able to grow and kind of bring more coaches and more people in, we've definitely paid more attention to resource development, content development, and ultimately like it's kind of exponential, right? You need more people to help reach. You need more people, and the more people you reach, then the more people you can bring on. But initially, it was very much okay. There's only 2 of us, and we're both maxed out with coaches, with clients. Like, what do we do from this point to continue to grow? Um, we've been super lucky that our clients do enjoy the service we provided, and still, even now 5 years on, I think it's 80 to 85% of our new business acquisition is referral from existing or previous clients. So I think that's probably been the best testament that anyone's been able to sort of provide us in what they think about how we do. But definitely over the last 12 months, we've worked to, Maggie's been absolutely amazing for us. She's our Vancouver hub lead. She also runs a lot of our social media. And she's been awesome to keep Kat, myself, Claire, all of us on point that, hey, I told you had to write a blog for this month, or I told you we needed to do this, so make sure it's done, which is kind of that kind of kick up the ass, I guess, that we need as well.
Yeah.
And so she's been fantastic to have her, and she's been forthright in saying, look, this is the direction I think that we should go. This is why you've given me this role, so I need you guys to kind of get on board and come with me. So that's handing over a lot of that kind of like responsibility is sometimes quite daunting, to give the brand that you started make someone else responsible for that continuation as well can be a hard task. But yeah, she's been good in driving, and now we've gone from just like the occasional post on Instagram that she has scheduled posts, you know, a month, 2 months in advance. We've got the YouTube channel that's going on as well. We do the podcast. So it's kind of been that learning through Maggie's direction. If we do this and this, that kind of gives us these other 10 sort of avenues. And ultimately, I guess, just kind of looking and seeing, well, as consumers, like what sort of media are we most attracted to? You know, and one of the things I really like, well, was Joe Rogan's podcast. Like I thought it was super interesting, a really good way to learn from a lot of different people. That was kind of a bit of the motivation behind starting a podcast. But then I found as often as I'm listening, I'm actually watching his podcasts on YouTube as well. So that was like, well, we're recording a lot on Zoom. What if we started a YouTube channel and put the content on there so that people that are a little bit more visually stimulated or enjoy like watching the conversation evolve can have that reach as well. So yeah, it's a fine line. Also, it's very hard to actually put a dollar amount on how much having all the social media and all the content is actually making the brand or making the business to justify the spend that is incurred, especially early on. But I think it's nice to have a little bit of, no matter what someone else's preference is in terms of their kind of content consumption, that they can find us and we can still work to get that message across. Does that answer the question?
It does. I mean, we're on the same page. I mean, content is king. And nowadays, if you're not, you know, using social media in some way, shape, or form, you're kind of just, you're asleep at the wheel. I mean, we're doing the same thing with our mom and pop platform. We've just started a YouTube channel. We have an Instagram page, and we're trying to create regular content to have a regular presence so people have a place to find us. And you're right. You don't know in the beginning, okay, is this worth it? How many people are really watching this? Is it worth all the time, the energy, the money, whatever? But
yeah,
it's the new currency in this day and age now. If you don't have a social media presence, I mean, you're a dinosaur. So you need to have some sort of steady stream of content for your ideal customers to find you.
I think it might not do necessarily directly heaps at this point for new client acquisition, but I think a potential new client might see us wearing the t-shirts at an event, and then they might maybe Google the brand, and then the Instagram page comes up, so then they can look at all the stuff that's on Instagram and see the messaging that we're about and see the content we're providing and maybe watch some of the videos, and then I might send an inquiry.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
It sort of stems from, it's not necessarily one thing specifically, but it's being able to have this kind of pool of once people notice the pool, then they're keen to go for a swim, then they might inquire about how to join and how to get started. So it's tough because it's time too, right? So you think about I think that's probably the biggest lesson you learn as a new business owner is how much of running a business is actually back end and not actually
yeah. I mean, the art and the craft of our products and services, the easy part now. It's all the back end stuff to get people in the door. That's the real work, right? Yeah. The stuff that we love doing, that's straightforward. No, absolutely. And do you have any tips?
That is the easiest part.
Well, do you have any tips or pointers for any small business owners or people aspiring to start a business? What advice would you give them?
Well, my advice would be do it. And I think there's a little bit of that, not necessarily like entrepreneurial spirit, but I got to a point, where I was like, I would rather try this for 2 years and fail and come back to be in the exact same position that I'm in, at least having had a crack and seeing if we could make it work. So my advice would be like, for sure. And I know, the older you get and the more kind of responsibilities that you have, it becomes much harder to kind of take that leap, right? But I think that ultimately, like, it's kind of like that point of life in general, right? Is to take that chance and see what happens. And I felt personally like I was already living my worst case scenario. So, and that's not to say that the job that I had wasn't very good or wasn't providing, but it was like, if this is always going to be here, like I can always come back to it, worst case, So my advice is definitely have a crack, but it's going to be much more work than you anticipate it's going to be. And I often wonder if I didn't have Kat to do it with, especially in the beginning, like I feel like I could easily have seen how that 2 year mark would have, been
Yeah.
an unachievable goal to get through, right? So I know you're in a similar position where you do have that support, and you've got Chloe there giving you a hand, and it does make it that kind of burden shared, right? Is a burden a little bit easier to deal with. But yeah, I would definitely say if it's something that you've been aching at or thinking about doing for a long time, start to put some measures in place to make it a reality. And I think everyone should have a side hustle in some regard, right? And if it starts to take, be willing to kind of jump in both feet, risk getting wet, and risk like losing quite a bit of sleep for the first 2 years. But like I said earlier, like I wouldn't change it for anything now, you know.
No,
So
it's awesome. I concur. I mean, especially with this pandemic now, if anything, we should realize life is short. There's no perfect time to do anything. You could be riding along perfectly, everything's going smoothly, and the rug can just get pulled right out from under you. So if you think there's a perfect time to do something, you're wrong. And if you got something pressing that you want to try, go for it, because it's better to know and fail than to live with regret, right? So
for
that's
sure.
what I always say.
Yeah, and if you're putting on a wait till I save this much, there's never a safe amount to do that either. You know, it's kind of like the perfect time. There's never an amount either that you could save. But I think yeah, the pandemic. I think I'm surprised that I haven't seen as much almost uh, rise of the freelancer as I thought that I might out of this. And I know that a lot of the individuals that I know that lost their work were working for those big corporations and stuff like that. I'm surprised they haven't been more like, I'm just going to go in as a contractor now and do it on my terms, because ultimately when you do, the pandemic's been challenging for sure, but when you're kind of in your own driver's seat, you get to decide how to spin the wheel and where to spin the wheel, rather than sort of sitting in the back and letting someone else take the charge. So, um, yeah, I would definitely say it's worth it for sure.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And again, too, it could also be it's a slightly different mindset. You're driving in a different lane and you see things slightly differently. You see kind of the end goal and the prosperity at the end, more so than just playing it safe and going for the steady paycheck. So
Yeah.
it's a different mentality for sure, but it's definitely more rewarding if you stay the course.
Yeah, I would almost argue like a little bit opposite to that statement. I almost think that when you are getting the steady paycheck and you're doing the 9 to 5, like that's when you can exactly see the end game. Like exactly how this plays out and how this ends. But I think maybe that's the exciting part of being a small business owner is, I have a direction of where I want to see MTMM eventually make it to, but I have no idea of the opportunities and the potential directions that could go from that point, or that come along with that. I think that is ultimately the most exciting thing about being in the position that we're in.
No, absolutely. Very open ended. No, that's awesome. Now,
Yeah.
where can everyone find Married to My Macros?
Man, everywhere. As I just mentioned, the content's been a big thing for us. Primarily, we are pretty Instagram focused. So the handle Married to My Macros. Like I said before, we're doing the podcast, which is called More Than Macros. That's on Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. And if you are more of a visual learner, the podcast and a lot of other instructional and different pieces of content that we're playing with as well can be found on our YouTube channel, which is Married to My Macros as well. So hopefully, no matter what your favorite medium is, we've got a place for you to connect with us. So yeah.
Thanks a lot. I appreciate it. And for those of you that don't know, a macro is a carbohydrate, a protein, and a fat. Just
That's
for the
right.
few who might not know what a macro is.
If someone's been listening to the whole episode just to get that little nugget, they're super happy now.
Yeah, yeah. But no, I appreciate your time, Ben. It was great catching up with you and hearing your story. And we'll be following your journey. And yeah, I wish you all the best moving forward for 2021 with your family and everything else. And yeah, we're going to connect a lot over the next few months for sure.
Of course, mate. Thank you very much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Great. Okay. Till next time.